Shalom and greetings. So today we got Dr. Kent Hovind and Adam Heap in a debate on the Genesis flood. So I'm going to let my buddy Standing for Truth take over from here.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Praise, for allowing us to use your channel for this really exciting debate. It's been in the making for about a month now, so I'm excited. Everybody's excited. I know the audience is excited. So thanks so much, Dr. Kent Hovind and Adam Heap, for giving us your time, to enjoy this debate on Noah's flood. So it's going to be about the Genesis flood. We're going to start off here with Adam Heap. We're going to have a short intro from Adam, and then an opening presentation from Dr. Hovind. We're going to do a free-flowing discussion for about 30 minutes after that. No interruptions, even times, and then go into a couple short closings, and then just enough time for a few questions from the audience. We'll be going for about an hour till 4. So I'll hand it over to you, gentlemen. If you wanted to start there, Adam, you're good to go. You're muted right now, brother. So.
Right. Hello. Does this work? Can you see me?
Yes.
Sweet. Hello. My name's Adam, and I'm here to learn today. So Kent Hovind is a firm believer in the story of Noah's Ark. I currently am not. So the purpose of this debate, it's not so much of a debate as a learning experience, is a chance for me to play a game of questions with Dr. Kent Hovind. And I have a large list here. So it's going to be a very short introduction. I'm not really bringing anything to the table. I'm letting him do his thing. And then I shall be probing where and how I can, just to check the validity of his claims and all that sort of stuff. So I hope we have a good day today. Thank you, Kent, for joining us. Thank you for the hosts for doing the hosty thing. Thank you, and I hope we have a good session today.
That was it. Okay. Well, thank you so much for doing this. Adam, you have an accent here. Can you tell me where you're from?
I am from Great Britain.
Great. They still call it that. Is it still great? Is it?
Oh, it's smashing. It should be called cracking Britain.
Oh. We have a Scotsman here who's shaking his head saying, no, it's not so great anymore, but okay.
Well, they're Scottish. They do nothing but complain, so.
Okay, I see. Well, if I understand it right, what we're supposed to be discussing here, debating or something, is the question, is the flood story true? Is Noah's Ark story true? Is the Bible correct? And thank you for doing this. And Adam, I was told your MS is in zoology and herpetology, the study of reptiles and animals. True is something that's in accordance with fact or reality. Would it be a fact, would it be reality that the world was completely flooded and one family built a boat and saved all the critters on the boat? That's what the story says in Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8. So is it true? In accordance with actual state of affairs is the Webster Dictionary definition of the word true. Definition of true, something that is real, factually correct, accurate, or provable, as opposed to a lie. Apostle Pilate said in John chapter 18, what is truth? And by the way, most politicians still have no clue what truth is. Nothing's changed in 2,000 years. The Bible tells us to think about things that are true. And so I don't want to believe anything that's not true. And so if the flood story isn't true, I would sure like to know it. I'm very willing to be taught on this. Let me give you a quick history of where I think this all fits together. In the book of 2 Peter, chapter 3, Peter warned us that in the last days there would be scoffers who would come, who would be willingly ignorant that of how by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. The Bible's pretty clear. When God made the earth, it was standing out of the water and in the water. What does that mean? Well, then it says, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. This world was destroyed by a flood. That's what the book says. Now, is it true? Well, the Bible says God sits on the circle of the earth and he stretched out the heavens. There are 17 references in the Bible to the stretching of the heavens, which explains the red shift and all that, but I want to get up to the part about the flood. I think to understand about Noah's flood and about the ark story, to find out, is this true? we first need to have an understanding of what the earth used to be like according to the Bible. Just like when you study any historical event like World War II, why did the Germans attack England? Well, you need to know the background behind it. What happened? What was going on here? And so to know the background behind the ark story, you need to understand what was the earth like. It says in the Bible, the earth was formed out of the water and in the water. I believe there used to be a seventh layer of our atmosphere. There are now 6 layers to the atmosphere: troposphere, stratosphere, exosphere, etc. The 7th layer was a layer of water or ice, probably above the atmosphere, probably 6 miles up, or in your metric system, that would be 10 kilometers straight up. There are some heat sinks up there. As you go up in the atmosphere, you get up a certain altitude, like 10 kilometers or 6 miles, and it's 100 below zero right now over our head here in Lenox, Alabama, where it's 95 degrees out there. So the earth had a canopy of water overhead. It also had water under the crust of the earth, and I cover this on video number 2 of my seminar series. Let me get up here. But Jews have always taught there was water above the atmosphere. Here we go, right here. There was also water under the crust of the earth. Most of the flood water for Noah's flood did not come from rain. Most of it came from inside the crust of the earth. Got a globe here somewhere. I did have. Where'd it go? Oh, here we go. All right. The earth today has a crust about 10 miles thick. It varies, sometimes only 3 miles thick under the ocean beds, but this crust of the earth used to have water in the crust of the earth, according to the scriptures anyway. The Bible says in Psalm 24, the earth is the Lord's. He founded it upon the seas. That means the foundation was upon the seas. And he established it upon the floods. So according to the Bible, the flood water was inside the earth, most of it. Same thing in Psalm 33. He gathereth the waters of the sea together as an heap. He layeth up the depth in storehouses. The depth is always a reference to the sea or the ocean in the Bible. So it used to be stored up inside the earth. Of course, everybody that studies earth science knows there's still a lot of water in the earth. Huge amounts of water still in the crust of the earth, subterranean water pockets. Okay, Psalm 136, he stretched out the earth above the waters. So the original creation had a layer of ice above, I'm just guessing 10 miles up, probably 2 or 3 inches thick. That made the earth like a big greenhouse, protected them, made them have perfect weather, perfect temperature, pole to pole, made the animals grow huge. Gigantic animals are found as fossils that simply are not alive today. They find fossil grasshoppers 2 feet long, fossil centipedes 18 inches long, fossil dragonflies with 5-foot wingspan. They simply could not fly today. Something had to be different. So a canopy overhead, like I think the Bible teaches, would be a reasonable explanation. They had greater air pressure and richer oxygen concentration to allow the insects to get much larger, and probably all the animals to get much larger in that world before the flood came and all this got messed up. There was a layer of air to breathe, probably 10 or 15 miles, and then a layer of rocks to stand on, the crust of the earth. Again, pick a number, 5 to 10 miles. And underneath that was water stored up for this flood. Walt Brown's book, In the Beginning, is fabulous on this, the hydroplate theory, how that there was water in the crust of the earth, and there still is a lot of it. The Bible says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, the same day were the fountains of the great deep broken up. Most of the flood water actually came from inside. It only rained for 40 days, but the water kept coming up for 150 days. So it's not all coming from rain. It's not possible to rain enough to cover all the mountains. I understand that. I don't think the mountains were there. I think the Bible teaches pretty clearly in Psalm 104, at the end of the flood, the mountains arose, the valleys sank down, and the water rushed off to fill in the holes. So it's interesting that all the mountain ranges today follow the coastlines. The Appalachian Mountains here in America follow the North Atlantic. The Rocky Mountains follow the Pacific. I think the mountain ranges formed during the last few months of the flood, when the mountains arose and the valleys sank down and the water rushed off. The plates of the earth is broken up into plates. I don't think anybody argues about that. Those plates would be shifting and moving with the weight of all this water on top, while the joints where they meet, the fault lines, was still weak, freshly broken, and they could still move. So the fountains of the deep broke open, and then the windows of heaven were opened, and it rained for 40 days. But the water underneath is really where the flood came from. It came shooting out to the surface along the cracks. The earth cracked up like an eggshell, and we have fault lines: San Andreas Fault, the Hayward Fault, the New Madrid Fault, None of them are my fault, but the Earth definitely has cracks all over the place, and some are still moving, and we still have volcanoes and earthquakes along those cracks generally. But the water rushing out during the flood, rushing out of these cracks would be under incredible pressure, 10 miles of rock. It would go shooting up like a rocket. Actually, a cubic foot of rock is about 160 pounds. That's what, 65, 70 kilograms. This would put 30 tons per square inch of pressure, 30 tons per square inch on the water underneath. It would go squirting out like a, what's the name of that water pressure thing they cut steel with?
Water jet.
Water jet. They make a water jet that'll cut through solid steel. 30 tons per square inch would shoot rocks up into orbit. I think we are still hitting debris from the stuff that was launched off the Earth 4,600 years ago during Noah's flood, 4,400 years ago. The other night we're out watching the shooting stars, and zip, zip, they go across the sky. We're still hitting the debris that that launched off of here. It's scattered in space, and we're traveling around the sun, and once in a while we smack into it like bugs on a windshield. So some of the rocks would launch up from the flood and come back and land on the Earth right away. Those would be erased by the flood. You would never see evidence of those. Those that landed near the end of the flood would probably leave a crater, but then most of it filled in, depending on how long it was exposed to water. Like the one in Quebec, Canada, 46 miles across, I think it is, the biggest crater on Earth known. That probably formed during the last part of the flood with a few weeks to go, and most of it filled in. And now it's just a circular lake. But the moon was probably shattered during this time, splattered with stuff coming off the Earth. The craters on the near side of the moon, the crater pattern is very different than the craters on the far side. This would be the stuff that shot past, got drawn back in by moon's gravity, and hit it on the backside. Earth has a lot of impact craters on it. You got some in England, I think, down near the southeastern tip of England. What's that, Cornwallis? No, it's the other side. Anyway, you have craters over there. Here's a Barringer crater in Arizona. I think this would have to be hit after the flood because it didn't fill in with sediments. It's still a big hole in the ground. The flood water escaping from underneath would cause the continents to slide back. Just like today, if you put 2 blocks of rock on top of a spring, move the rocks apart, all of a sudden the spring will bounce up in the middle, and the crust of the Earth would do that. The subterranean world, the basalt layers, would spring up into the crack. As the crack gets wider, probably from simple erosion, from the water gushing out, as it gets to a certain depth or width, all of a sudden the bottom springs up. This happens in large mines all the time. They keep digging out the rock. As they get further and further back, all of a sudden the bottom of the mine buckles up just from the weight on the outside. It might be a quarter mile away, but it makes the center of the mine buckle up. You can study all that. So I think Walt Brown is exactly right. The crust of the Earth broke. The water came out. The basalt underneath lifted up, causing the crust of the Earth to slide away. As long as there's still lubricating water under there, it would eventually grind to a halt when it hits bottom. That explains why we have wrinkled mountains. It's no different than pushing a carpeting up into the wall. All of a sudden it begins to wrinkle up. So lateral movement of the crust of the Earth would cause these wrinkled mountain patterns that we find around the world. The Earth still has the fault lines on it today. I think all the evidence that we see from earth science and from geology points to the fact this Earth was destroyed by a flood. They find fossils on top of Mount Everest, tallest mountain in the world. Petrified clams in the closed position. I think I got one here. Yep. When you get petrified clams in the closed position, you know it had to be buried alive. There's a place in North Alabama where they're 10 feet thick, millions of petrified clams, beds of clams, closed. You can go down to the beach 70 miles south there in Pensacola and find 1 million seashells, but you aren't going to find a matched pair, and you certainly won't find them closed. Had to be buried alive. I don't know of another choice. If you got a better theory, I'd like to see it. So here the Bible says Noah built an ark, saved 2 of each kind on board. I'm not sure exactly what a kind is in every case, but 2 of each kind, probably about 4,000 kinds of animals, plus the birds, maybe another 1,000 kinds of birds, just guessing, had to be on that ark. Then after that, they have diversified now through natural selection and variation within the kind. They've diversified into millions of species, but that's different than kinds. So Today, the Earth has ocean basins. 70% of the Earth is still underwater. So if someone asks, where did the water from the flood go? It's still here. It's in the oceans. Just the Pacific is big enough to hold every continent in the world. All the continents would fit in just the Pacific. The Earth today is 71% underwater. Only 29% is above water. And the part that's above water is only an average height of 2,300 feet or 2,600 feet, whereas the depth of the oceans averages 12,000 feet. So today, if you smoothed out the world, push all the mountains down, smooth it out, the water would be 8,000 miles deep, 8,000 feet deep, everywhere. 1.5 miles of water, completely covering the Earth. That water's still here. The oceans today are gaining salt as mineral salts wash off the ground from water and erosion in rivers. And the evaporation takes out the water only, leaves the salt behind. It's a giant distillation process. So the oceans are gaining salt every day, yet they're only 3.6% salt. At the rate they're gaining salt, you would say, hey, this could have happened in a few thousand years. I think during Noah's flood, all the world was fresh water. Noah didn't have to bring water on board. He probably brought babies of all the animals, about 6,000 or 8,000 different kinds of animals, onto the ark. He didn't have to bring insects because they don't have nostrils. So God told him to bring those in whose nostrils is the breath of life. And insects can survive a flood just fine. So the flood was probably all fresh water, had all the water they needed, and now it's gradually become saltier since the flood. And some animals have adapted to salt water. We now have freshwater alligators and saltwater alligators, or crocodiles, I'm saying. They might have had a common ancestor called a crocodile. That's not proof crocodiles are related to mosquitoes. So to change, there are saltwater bass and freshwater bass. 1 minute left, okay. So today there is still an enormous amount of water in the crust of the Earth. There are hot water subterranean vents. If there's hot water shooting up into the bottom of the ocean, where does it have to be coming from? Lower than the bottom of the ocean. Like, duh, okay? Tens of millions of these hot water vents are shooting up down there. And there's plenty of evidence of there still being a lot of water in the crust of the Earth. Deep sea hydrothermal vents, they're called, and you can Google that and get a million pictures. So my position is, it is very reasonable, it is logical, it is true to believe there was a flood that destroyed this world. We have evidence of the damage it did all over the place. It is certainly reasonable that all the animals could come from 7,000 or 8,000 pairs of animals on a boat. It is not reasonable that all the animals could come from a rock 4.6 billion years ago, like the evolution theory teaches. It is reasonable that all the peoples of the world could come from a family of 8 on a boat. I think it's very reasonable. Okay, there you go.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that opening presentation, Dr. Ken Hovind. Thank you for your introduction, Adam. Our next phase will be approximately about 25 or 30 minutes, just free-flowing dialogue. Hopefully I don't have to step in. Your last debate, guys, was actually very respectful, very fun to listen to, very engaging. So I'll leave it up to you guys and start the timer on whoever's first word, whoever wants to start.
Adam, go ahead.
Cheers, Kent. Interesting opening from yourself. If I could compare, if I was to say I had a carrot in the kitchen, and then one day I came home and the carrot was missing. There's the fact. The carrot has gone missing. I could throw out a what-if scenario. I could say the ghost of King Henry VIII came riding in on his horse and took the carrot. Well, it explains it because the carrot is no longer here. And ghost must exist. King Henry VIII existed. So it must be true. That's essentially what I'm hearing here. You're saying stuff and just applying your story to it, but giving no actual evidence to support the claims. One of the things that that was just a response to that. One of the things I want to do, I've got a list of questions here that stray a bit away from the geology. I don't know much about the geology. So if I could go over some of these questions that I've written, I'd love to do that, unless you wanted to continue with the stuff that you started with.
Well, as far as your Henry VIII stealing the carrot story, I think you could probably list every person on the earth instead of Henry VIII. It could be anybody. But I think that'd be a poor analogy. I did give lots of evidence. Okay, it is a fact. Fossilized clams are found all over the world, including the top of Mount Everest, and they're in the closed position. This is a fact. I don't think anybody argues with that. The flood story is a reasonable explanation for that. There are features like Grand Canyon here in America, where the top of the canyon is 4,000 feet higher than where the river starts cutting. The river starts cutting the canyon at Page, Arizona, and you can Google it. It's got an elevation of 2,800 feet above sea level. Well, the top of the canyon is 8,000 feet above sea level. Rivers don't flow uphill. Grand Canyon is a washed out spillway from a giant lake that drained. Go ahead.
What I mean by evidence is a collection of facts that point only to one specific explanation. That's what I meant by the King Henry VIII thing. It explains it, but there's no actual evidence to support that explanation. It's the same with yours. I mean, with the clams, there's all sorts of explanations for why that happened. Why is it your flood specifically?
Well, okay, I would like to hear your other explanations for the clam, but before we get there, keep in mind, we are not demanding that our explanation be taught in the schools at taxpayer expense. The evolutionists are demanding that we all pay to teach their explanation at taxpayer expense. I don't think there's any evidence at all that any animal has ever produced any other kind of animal. There is no scientific evidence that a dog ever made a non-dog or came from a non-dog. But yet all of us are being forced to pay for that religion to be taught in the schools. If we were all forced to pay, Henry VIII came and stole your carrot, I think everybody would object.
Should we pay to teach gravity in schools?
Your religion.
Should we teach gravity in schools?
Say, I didn't understand that. What now?
Should we teach the theory of gravity in schools? Can you hear me okay?
Well, yeah, there's plenty of evidence for gravity. I can show it. I can demonstrate it. We can measure it. 9.8 meters per second, 32 feet per second. I think we can demonstrate it. Can you demonstrate? Can you give me an explanation? Can you show me any animal producing a different kind of animal? Is this something that's
the topic for another debate, unfortunately, because we are.
Well, my point is, the flood story is a reasonable explanation, but we're not demanding that it be taught at taxpayer expense. So the burden of proof is not on me. You guys want to demand that we all teach your religion of evolution, and I think that's unfair and probably illegal.
But we're not talking about evolution in this debate. We're talking about Noah's flood. Can I ask my questions?
Noah's flood. How did the clams get on top of Mount Everest, Adam? What is your explanation? Petrified in the closed.
I'm here to listen to your explanation and decide whether
I gave you mine.
Or not.
I gave you mine. The world was flooded, completely flooded. During the end of the flood, the mountains lifted up and the valley sank down, and so the mountains formed in the last part of the flood. Psalm 104 tells us that. That's a reasonable explanation. We have the clams on top of the mountain, and they're closed. And this doesn't happen any place in the world today. In nature, clams die all the time by the millions, but they don't ever petrify in the closed position. It's hard to get animals to find animals petrifying at all anywhere. But petrified fossils are found in the ground by the billions and maybe even trillions. Fossils are found. They're not formed. How many animals died today in the world or yesterday? And none of them fossilized. The buzzards dragged them all over, the coyotes, the ants. And fossils simply don't form. We never see fossils forming. And yet we find them in the ground by the billions. What's your explanation for fossils at all?
My explanation for fossils is that it's a process of I don't usually do fossilization, so that's not my field. But there have been billions of years for this stuff to happen, and it probably still is happening today.
You're sure there have been billions of years for it to happen?
Pretty certain.
Okay. Well, we don't see it happening today at all. So I don't think billions of years is going to help, okay? If I told you if you kiss a frog, it'll turn to a prince, I think we would all agree that's a fairy tale. But it sounds to me like you believe if we wait billions of years, the frog will turn into the prince on its own. I think it's still a fairy tale. It's not true. There's no evidence for that. There's no evidence of any animal.
Can we keep this on Noah's flood, please?
Okay, sure. Noah's flood, the story says, God told Noah, two of each kind are going to come to you, save them on the boat. Afterwards, they got off the ark and spread out, probably from the country of today, Turkey. They could have easily gone everywhere in the world while the crust of the earth was more exposed, just by lowering the oceans a few hundred feet. It connects everything. I mean, the water between Vietnam and Australia, this water is only 30 feet deep. The width of this Rome. That's the depth of the water generally in here. So lowering the water 100 feet would connect everything. So animals could easily get off the ark in Turkey and over 100 years walk anywhere. So I think Noah's flood is a really reasonable explanation for why we have billions of fossils, for why we have layers and strata to the earth. During the flood, the moon would be pulling the water up, the high tide, and In order to keep that bump full as the earth turns, the water has to rush sideways to keep the bump full at the same speed the earth is turning. Well, here in Lenox, Alabama, 31 degrees north latitude, we're turning nearly 900 miles an hour. Water going sideways at 900 miles an hour would explain why we have gravel that is rounded off. It was in a big rock tumbler. It would explain why we have layers, stratification. Noah's flood is a very reasonable explanation for why we have stratification, for why we have petrified trees in the standing position connecting all these layers.
Okay.
I'll show you pictures if you like.
Is it all right if we move on to my questions? I've been begging. I've been actually gagging to go over these questions.
I thought you wanted Noah's flood. Go ahead. What's your question?
Yeah. So I've got a series of questions. The first one being very simple. How big was the ark?
According to the Bible, it was about 515 feet, 300 cubits. And a cubit is elbow to fingertip. Mine's 20.2 inches. The standard Egyptian cubit is 20.65 inches. Everybody's cubit would be a little different. But according to the Bible, it'd make it about 515 feet long and about 85 feet wide and about 57 or 52 feet high, I believe, in 3 stories, 3 floors to it.
Would you agree that would probably be the largest wooden ship ever built?
At the time, yes, it would be the largest that we know of. Of course, according to the Bible, the people before the flood were living to be 900 years old. You could learn a lot in 900 years. Plus, God told him how to build it. There have been many ships built much bigger than that now. The Queen Mary is nearly twice it. What's that?
Are they all? Is it the largest wooden ship ever built?
There was a wooden ship built about that big. They had trouble sailing it because it had 6 sails, 6 masts, and the wind hit them at different speeds and twisted it, and it kept leaking. Of course, Noah's Ark didn't have any sails or masts. It wasn't designed to go anywhere. There's no place to go. It was only designed to float. So it'd be more like probably a barge of some kind, float and land. It's only two. All it had to do is float, protect its cargo, and land. It didn't have to go anywhere. No sailing, subject to stresses of sailing would not be affect Noah's Ark.
Okay. How many animals were on the ark? And considering I picked up some quotes here from the Bible, Genesis 7:2, of every clean beast thou shalt take to thee by 7s. The male and his female, and of beasts that are not clean by 2, the male and his female. Considering later on as well, Noah decided to scrap that idea and just brought 2 of each. Which is the right one? Is it 7s of some and 2 of others, or is it just 2 all across the board?
Well, you just read it. It says that couldn't be more clear. There were 7 of the clean animals and 2 of each of the unclean. There are 2 theories about the clean. One is he took 7 pairs. The other is he took simply 7 animals, 7 clean, and then after the flood, Noah sacrificed some of them, which of course would wipe out the species if there's only 2. So the Bible there's no fuzziness about what it says. It says 7 of the clean and 2 of the unclean. Now
then it goes on. It goes on to say 7:8 of clean beasts and of beasts that are not clean and of fowls, etc., etc. They went in 2 by 2 onto Noah into the ark.
Correct. That's what it says, and that's, I believe, what happened.
You just said it was 7s of the clean. You just said it was 7s of the clean.
Okay. I said there's 2 theories. Some people say it's 7 pairs. Some people say just 7.
These are both in the Bible, and it's contradictory.
It's not contradictory. He brought 7 of the clean.
Of clean beasts, etc., etc. They went in 2 and 2. Chapter 7, verse 8. Of clean beasts, and of beasts that are not clean, and of fowls, and of everything that creepeth upon the earth, there went in 2 and 2 unto Noah into the ark.
Okay, if there are 7, are there at least 2? There were 2 of each kind. There were extras of the clean. I don't think anybody reading that without any prejudice would see a contradiction there. They would say, oh, this is no problem. He brought 2 of every kind of animal and 7 of the clean. That's what it says.
Okay. Let's move on then. All right. The Bible states that 2 of every sort will go onto the ark. What is a sort?
That's a great question. Carolus Linnaeus decided to classify animals, which is what your MS is in, zoology and herpetology. We have our classification system that we've used in the last 400 years based on kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. I don't think God cares about our classification system. He divided the animals up into their sort or kind. That phrase is used 20 times in the first 7 chapters. They would bring forth after their kind or bring forth after their sort. So I think in most cases, a 5-year-old could tell you if two animals are the same sort of animal. I think a 5-year-old would know that a dog and a wolf are the same sort or same kind of animal. And I think probably a 3-year-old would know a dog and a mosquito are not the same kind. So I think 99% of the cases, it's a no-brainer. Now, there are some difficult ones, even today in classification. If your degrees in herpetology or in zoology, you would understand. People today argue about which family or which genus a certain animal goes into. There is still a huge amount of argument about speciation. Which species is this, and giving it the proper name. And sometimes they have to bump them around and move them around to a whole new class or a whole new family or genus, maybe not an order. I don't know how far it goes. I would just guess that the Bible term kind or sort is probably somewhere along the line of family, according to our current classification system.
So there's no distinction between the two?
Between kind and sort?
Yeah.
I don't know of any distinction because the words are used interchangeably in the flood story, especially in Genesis 6 and 7. Kind and sort appear to be the same meaning of the same word.
Okay. So have you got any definition for either of them?
Any definition for what now?
For either of them, sort or kind.
Well, that's what I just got done telling you. I think that, do you have a definition for the word species?
Yeah.
Well, we have...
They produce fertile offspring.
Well, are dog and a wolf different species?
Dogs are wolves.
Canis domesticus.
That's a nonsense question.
No, it's not a nonsense. Why are they named? They have a different species name. Canis lupus, Canis domesticus, Canis coyotes. They're different species, but yet they can interbreed. Can you give me an airtight definition of species that never has an exception to it?
That never has an exception to it. Well, that's quite difficult because once you get into like certain bacterias, they don't reproduce in the same way. So you can't really do it across the board because things work with different organisms.
I agree.
But the majority, like your terrestrials and your vertebrates and your invertebrates, it tends to be pretty obvious with some exceptions.
That's exactly. Adam, you're making my point for me. That's exactly correct. It generally tends to be obvious. I think it's obvious to a 4-year-old what the same kind of animal is. I bet if you give me 1,000 pictures of animals, we got a 3-year-old on the campus here. Just turned 3. I'll say, Abby, would you please sort these? Which ones would you say are the same kind? I bet she would get 95% of them. And I bet her 5-year-old brother would get probably 98% of them. So even today, and you know this is true.
So you say that 3- and 4-year-olds can do it. Okay, so if it's that easy, let's have a definition.
It is those that they could originally bring forth after their kind.
How would you decide that? How would you research that?
Today, Alaska rabbits cannot breed with Florida rabbits. They have diversified. They're still rabbit. The Florida rabbits can breed with the Minnesota rabbits, and the Minnesota rabbits can breed with the Alaska rabbits. But the rabbit family has diversified to where some of the branches are no longer interfertile. Mm-hmm. They probably could be induced, in the laboratory or something, but there's enough differences in the cold weather rabbits and the warm weather rabbits that they generally won't bring forth. But so in the original creation, they could all bring forth the same kind. I think a dog and a wolf can bring forth offspring. I think a dog and a mosquito cannot. Neither can a dog and a whale or a dog and a pine tree. So I think in 99% of the cases, it's sort of obvious, like you said, what the same kind of animal is. Now, why would you pick at this straw, strain out this gnat, and swallow a camel? Do you believe mosquitoes and whales are related? You have an MS in zoology. Are mosquitoes and whales related, Adam?
I'm a bit... You haven't actually you've given me examples and they're vague at best, but you haven't actually given me a definition. You say a 3- or 4-year-old can tell what a kind is, and yet you haven't given a definition for it.
I did. I said they could bring forth. Originally, they could bring forth.
That's what species is. There you say originally, but that you've told me that you've given me a vague example of, we think that rabbits are all the same kind, but that's not actually evidence. So you need to have an actual definition that we can work with today to bring results.
Okay. Hold it. I need to have an absolute definition. Adam, I'm not making
I didn't say absolute. I didn't say absolute. I didn't say
Okay, absolute. Yeah, you did say absolute. Okay, but I'm not forcing everybody to pay for my theory to be taught. You think we should
No. Don't change it again. Don't do that. I want a definition of sort and kind. that we can work
I
with
told you.
to decide.
I'll tell you again for the third time. Write it down this time. Those that originally could bring forth are the same kind.
Now, how do you test that? A definition has to be something that you can test as well. You can apply things to.
If I was demanding for my theory to be taught in the schools, then I would have.
Don't do that again. Don't do that again. Stick on the topic. Kind of sort definition.
I want you to, Adam, I want you to see the hypocrisy of what you are doing. You think everybody should teach evolution, don't you?
It depends where it's happening. If it's a PE class, I don't think it should be taught there.
Okay. Should all the kids in public school science classes be taught that evolution is true?
I think they should be taught its current science, not scientific knowledge.
It's the current scientific theory, or it's current scientific fact?
Well, there are facts within evolution. A culmination of facts brings about a theory.
I see you're reluctant to answer
You're
the
trying
question.
to move away from the fact that I'm trying to get you to give me definitions that actually work.
I
can see that you're trying to get me away from it and try to turn it back on me. But we're not talking evolution. This is Noah's flood. We're not talking about evolution.
Okay. I'm showing the hypocrisy. I'm not asking everybody demanding everybody pay for mine to be taught, but I'll give you a definition. The Bible says they will bring forth, i.e., have babies, after their kind. Do you know of any exceptions where any animal has ever brought forth something that was not the same kind of animal?
Well, how can I do that if you haven't given me a definition of kind? How can I give you an example of something that's changed kind if you haven't defined kind?
I'll give it to you again. If they can bring forth. Let's look at all the babies in the world today of anything, plants or animals. Are they the same kind as their parent? Do you know of any that would be considered a different kind? What's the best example you know of?
You haven't defined kind, so how can I answer?
Well, look at the baby, look at the mama. Is this going to come out to be looking and working and functioning the same way as the mama and dad? I think it's the same kind of animal.
Not if the baby's born without legs.
What now? Are there babies born that are not the same kind as the parents?
You just said if it functions the same as the mother. Well, if a baby's born without legs, then it doesn't function the same way as the mother. You haven't defined kinds. You can't ask me to give you an example of kinds, given something that's non-kind, when you haven't given me the definition of kind itself. I've been asking you for the last 10 minutes to give me just one definition, and you've failed to do it.
I've given it to you 6 times. Pay attention, son, or you're going to, pay attention, son, you're going to flunk my class if you don't pay attention. They could originally bring forth after their kind. If they could bring forth. That's the definition. Can they bring forth? Can they produce babies? Can a pine tree and a whale make a baby? Can a pine tree and a mosquito make a baby?
Can a bearded dragon and an iguana? Can a bearded dragon and an iguana?
Iguana?
A bearded dragon and an iguana.
No, that's a good question.
How about a royal python and an anaconda?
I don't think an anaconda and a bearded dragon can make a baby.
What about royal python and a European adder?
No. There are about 60 or 80 different families within the snake category. Maybe it's more, maybe it's 100, but certainly there are not millions. I think all the snakes in the world could probably be put into 100 different kinds.
How do you know that?
I'm just picking a number for sake of the argument here. We can look it up exactly.
What gives you that number? What gives you that number? Why do you settle at 100?
Well, it's reasonable to work with. It's reasonable to work with. Do you think a snake and a elephant can bring forth a baby?
Why are you bringing an elephant into this? We're talking snakes.
I'm trying to get you to see how stupid the evolution theory is. It's retarded. And here we are all paying for this to be taught to everybody, and it's insanely stupid. It is not true. I'm defending the flood story as being reasonable. It is reasonable to believe God made animals to bring forth after their kind. Noah brought them onto the ark after their kind, and today they're still bringing forth after their kind. That is very reasonable. I think I win the debate. That was the purpose of the debate, to defend the Bible story. Show me an example where any animal brought forth something other than its kind.
So you said kind was it brings forth after its original kind. How do you find what the original is?
I've told you 7 times now. Son, I think you flunk. Okay, take the class again. If they can bring forth, they are the same kind. Here's Webster's dictionary. Kind, sort, variety, class, a natural group or division. Did you say, could the animals be naturally divided into division into birds and reptiles? They could be naturally divided. Could they be divided with fish Can fish be divided away from birds? Can they be naturally divided?
Can I give you an example of a? Have you ever heard of Morganucodon? Which is a.
I can't understand you. Example
it's
of what now?
Morganucodon. It is a.
I didn't hear you.
It's a reptile. Morganucodon. It might be Morganusodon.
I'm sorry, I did not hear what he said. The computer gone?
The name doesn't really matter. It is a reptile that has fur. It's got the gait of a lizard, and it's got the jaw that's halfway between lizard or reptile and mammal jaw. Is that
you have a
mammal?
A reptile with fur? Wait a minute, Adam, slow down now. You're a zoologist here. What is the name of the reptile with fur, please?
Morganucodon.
How do you spell that?
Morgan. You know, like the name Morgan.
Okay.
U-C.
U-C?
Odon. So yeah, O-D-O-N.
Morganucodon is a reptile with fur, you're telling me. I've never heard of this. I will look it up. Now, if there are some strange ones like the duck-billed platypus that we don't know where to put them, would you put the duck-billed platypus in the same kind or in the same species as anything else? Is there anything similar to a duck-billed platypus? Or is it
put it in the same species as anything else? Well, no, because it's a species unto itself.
It's a species unto itself. Very good. So we can classify animals. How do we classify animals at all? If evolution is true, there should be a blended variety from the amoeba to the whale with everything in between. Why can we even classify them at all? Noah's flood story is very reasonable to answer that. They came onto the ark after their kind. They went off after their kind. They've been making babies after their kind ever since.
Okay. How do you classify red and green?
Good question.
Take the color spectrum and classify red and green and make it distinguished.
Right. Somebody has to all the scientists have to get together and agree this frequency will be called green. If it varies too far from that, we'll have to call it something else. But there's probably a blended infinite number of colors between our 7 colors we've chosen to set as the standard: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. So indigo violet. So I think we have set standards for saying this is red, a certain frequency, but there's 10 million shades of red, and they gradually fade into the other colors. I understand.
Exactly. Gradual fade,
now,
right.
Adam,
we get back onto Noah's flood now, please.
Do we see the same blending between elephants and snakes? Where is the animal that's 96% elephant? Where is the animal 96% elephant? If
possible, I think we've strayed off topic. Could we go back to Noah's flood?
I'm going to stop. I'm just going to.
You don't want to answer that question. You made up the color story about the red and green. I'm asking you, where is the animal that is 96% elephant?
If you can answer that question, Adam.
Well,
I can show you a color that's 96% green.
No, you can't.
I could show you there's a blending between green and red. I don't think you can show me a blending between snakes and elephants. I think you're making it all up. I think it's a stupid theory.
And then I'm just going to step in real quick here. So looks like you've, on your question, Adam, about kinds and related questions to that, looks like we spent a while on that. I've got some things written down from Dr. Hovind's opening presentation. We've got exactly 4 minutes for the discussion portion. Do you have any objections to anything that Dr. Hovind said in regards to the canopy, fossils, the evidence that he gave for a global flood? If we want to spend the last few minutes on those things instead of kind.
I'd like because I've only gone through like 3 of the 20 questions I've had. So if I just get some quick answers to some of the other questions. Okay. That's why I'm trying to get it back. So I've worked hard on these questions and I've hardly been able to get any of them.
Of course, yep. And take as much time as you need if you want to ask your question and not spend too much time, I guess, arguing on one question. Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Right. So, Kent, how long was the vessel at sea for?
The battle at sea? What is that?
Oh, no, the vessel at sea for.
Well, according to the Bible, Noah got in the ark and then a year and 2 weeks later got out of the ark. However, it says in the 7th month, it landed. It took 5 months for the earth to dry out or the water to run away or the crust of the earth to quit shaking around. So Noah was at sea for probably about 6 or 7 months.
Right, okay.
Okay.
Yep. How did Noah account for lull and roll of the boat? Because I imagine there's probably a lot of turbulence. Water turbulence. You probably got at least a sea state 8 or 9 throughout this whole thing. How do we account for lull and roll of the boat, considering that keels weren't invented until the Vikings?
Well, if you study what they have discovered in Turkey that they're claiming is indeed Noah's Ark, let's see, it's on part 3 of my story. They have found 12 giant stones. They call them drogue stones, D-R-O-G-U-E. The drogue stones apparently were held under the boat hanging by ropes. Let's see, the Ark, I don't know where that is. I have to find the slides if you watch my seminar series. But they found 12 of these rocks. They weigh about 9,000 pounds apiece. They apparently were held over the side of the boat hanging on ropes. Drogue stones, they're called. I'll show you pictures. If I had the question earlier, I'd get ready for it. But what would happen if you had rocks hanging around the boat, big rocks hanging on ropes, the wind would automatically turn you perpendicular to the waves. You don't have any roll because you're facing the waves head on. It's called a drogue stone. These have been found. They're in the museums over there in Turkey, where they have the Turkish government built a visitor center where they claim Noah's Ark is, what the remnants of it. If you watch my video number, here it is right here. Video number 3, the drogue stones, slide number 148, 148, enter. This is one of the drogue stones here. The Vikings carved crosses on them when they came through there. Not the Vikings, the Crusaders. They said, man, this is from Noah's Ark. These rocks weigh about 9,000 pounds, 4,000 kilograms. The hole in the top is larger in the center than it is at the exits on both sides. Apparently, there was a rope through there with a knot in the middle, so it can't chafe the rope and go back and forth. Ships today in the Sea of Galilee, use drogue stones to hang them over the side of the boat. During stormy weather, drop the rocks down in. It stops the roll from happening because the rocks create drag, effectively a sea anchor. Here's an example of what it might look like. If it gets really windy, the boat would be automatically turned perpendicular to the waves. You hit them head on. So there is no roll at sea with a boat with drogue stones. Simple solution. I mean, people today can figure this out. Noah was 600 when he built the boat. I'm sure he figured it out, and he did it under the instructions of God. So the answer to your question is there were probably big rocks hanging all over the boat, drogue stones, they're called, and that would prevent, there was no roll.
Okay.
Ships today.
Can I move on to my next question?
Navy, ask the Navy of your country, do they try to always hit the waves nose on? Of course they do, because you don't want the roll. So Noah didn't have to have any steering mechanism at all. The wind is going to cause the waves. Waves are always perpendicular to the wind. And so by having the side of the boat itself catch the wind, it's going to turn it perpendicular. It's going to hit them head on. There will be no such thing as roll on the ark.
Okay. Moving on then. What was the next question? So I've mentioned water turbulence. Obviously, what would the water turbulence be like? What would be the sea state?
I didn't understand that. I speak American, not English. But what was it?
What would have been the sea state? Sea state goes 1 through 10. 1 is like the water is like a mirror. 10 is the waves are 50 feet high.
Well, that even to this day, right now, this moment, it varies from 1 to 10 all over the world. I mean, some places it's a 1, some places it's a 10 right now. So
considering the conditions of Noah's flood, what would the
there's no way to tell. Be? I think Noah was in calm water the whole time and didn't have a problem.
Calm water, despite the fact that all this water has been displaced.
Oh, yeah. There's water when they had the earthquake in Indonesia in 2004, all the landslide underwater made a huge tidal wave that killed 250,000 people. We didn't feel a thing in Pensacola, Florida.
Wait, so you said earlier that the water was jetted so much that debris was flung into space. The entire world was flooded, and you think
right? And within an effective radius of that crack, you would get enormous problems. But see, Noah was outside of the danger zone from all those cracks.
Okay.
Prove I'm wrong.
Right. Ancient Mesopotamia would use what we now call keleks at the time of the supposed Noah's flood, which ships.
You've got 20 seconds, gentlemen. So I guess this will be your last question.
Yeah. Okay. Is it all right to just finish off this question then, despite the time limit?
Of course. Yeah. Ask that question, and we'll allow Dr. Hovind to respond.
Right, okay. So the question overall is what kind of boats would be around during that era? So obviously you've got ancient Mesopotamia, they used keleks, which were ships supported by inflated animal skins. The Egyptians had only just started making boats that were able to enter the oceans, and they were made with bits of wood or papyrus, and they were tied together with rope, and all the holes were filled with reeds. How would you, in the times where this is the top of technology, the absolute top, how would you expect a boat to be at sea for over a year in, you say the seas were calm, but they wouldn't be, turbulent waters, with a wooden ship bigger than the biggest wooden ship ever built? How do you account for that?
Well, first of all, he was at sea for 7 months. I already answered that. Secondly, he was 600 years old. He'd be smart enough to think of this kind of stuff ahead of time. Thirdly, God told him how to build the boat. Fourthly, we can't prove it was in calm water or rough water. You're assuming the worst in every scenario because you don't want to believe the Bible, do you, son? You want to reject God's clear teaching of the word, and I understand that. That's your option. But worse yet, you guys want all of us to pay for that stupidness to be taught in schools. I don't think that's fair. But I think Noah's Ark story is told very clearly and succinctly in the Bible in 3 chapters, Genesis chapter 6, 7, and 8. Jesus claimed to believe it. Millions of people around the world have claimed to believe there was a worldwide flood. 330 flood legends now have been found from cultures around the world that had no connection with each other. There's certainly a lot of history about a worldwide flood. So to answer the specific questions of exactly how tall were the waves when Noah was, sailing 6 months and 3 days after the storm started, I don't know. Doesn't matter. But there are storms going on right now, probably hurricanes right now hitting Thailand or something. They're not affecting us over here. It's a big world. And it's very reasonable for there to be really horrible waves and storms and perfectly calm outside an effective radius of that. That's simple inverse square law.
Have you ever been on on a flat bottom vessel in Sea State 4?
Oh, I don't know if it was flat bottom or not. Why would you say that?
Because keels weren't invented until the Vikings.
Keels weren't invented. That's in our modern history. That's post-flood. Noah's Ark apparently did have a keel. They found it. Let me show you here.
There weren't any keels known until the Vikings, which were...
Well, that's because they're not studying Noah's Ark. They found the keel up near the mountain, Mount Ararat. This is a volcano. Mudslides and lava flows have pushed the ark down, but it tore the keel off. It was actually full of ballast stones. Noah's Ark had an effective keel because it's still there. Go over and study it in Turkey. You can go see it for yourself. There are ballast stones in it right now, and it's ripped off the bottom of the boat. The boat has slid down 17 miles from 4,000 miles of earthquakes and mud flows. So just because the Vikings finally refigured it out doesn't mean there wasn't one before that. People were 900 before the flood. I think you're stuck with the dreaming assumption that people today are smart and ancient people are stupid. That's starting with the wrong premise. Ancient people were smart. We can't build the pyramids today. We can't lift a 2,000-ton stone up in the wall of Machu Picchu. We have no way of lifting it. They knew something we don't know.
And I'm just going to stop it there, gentlemen. I think that's the perfect way to end the discussion. We're going to go right into your quick closing, Adam, just a minute or two. And then Dr. Hovind, same thing. Thanks so much for the discussion. Very engaging, a lot of fun. Audience seemed to enjoy. And then we're going to go into a really quick question and answer before this hour is up. We've got 2 questions for each of the debaters, so it'll be nice and quick. We'll start with you, Adam. You've got a couple minutes. Say what you need to say, and then we'll go on to Dr. Hovind to give his final thoughts as well.
Thank you very much. There are a lot of questions that I didn't get to go over. At various points, he tried to bring it onto evolution when I made it clear at the start. That's not what we were talking about. We were talking about Noah's flood. And every time he got cornered, he said, well, I'm not the one pushing for this to be taught in schools, which is a bogus defense. It's not even a defense. It's just trying to avoid any sort of answer. I could have gone over things such as what did Noah do about the insects? I mean, the Bible verses said that everything that was living was destroyed on the earth apart from that which was on Noah's boat. I didn't get to answer that question. What did everything eat on the ark? What did they drink? Where would this be stored? Because obviously on a boat, you'd need it to be central. You need everything to be central. Where's all this weight distributed? Did anything get sick on the ark? When Noah made the sacrifice of an animal after they landed, did he wipe out an entire species? If animals microevolved after the flood, like he says they do, and we've got the great diversity of life after the flood, What would life look like in 100 million years from now? What happened to plants if they went on the ark? Because if there's a flood that destroyed everything on Earth, surely we wouldn't have plants anymore. Why don't all animals show a genetic bottleneck at the time of the flood? It's something we simply don't see. Why were there civilizations such as the Egyptians completely unaffected by the flood? Why does the Chinese calendar start in 4717 and wasn't interrupted by the flood? What about dinosaurs? What about Tiktaalik and Morganukdon, which I mentioned earlier? Were they on the flood? How soon after the flood, if they were on the boat, were they killed off? Were there any animals left off of the ark? Why is the last common male human ancestor estimated to be about 340,000 years old as of latest estimates, whereas it should be in the region of 4,000 something years old if we were to believe this story? And my last question would have been, why does all modern science disagree with you? I didn't get to answer any of these questions because he kept diverting and trying to place the blame on me. But I've enjoyed this. Thank you very much. My name's Adam. I hope I've done you all a good service tonight. Thank you and goodbye.
All right.
Okay, well, for that, Adam, go ahead, Dr. Hovind. Sorry.
Okay. Adam, thank you for doing this. I've been turned down for debates about 8,000 times. Most people don't want to defend their religion in front of somebody who may be able to answer them. And by the way, every question you asked here in your last closing here, I think I can answer. And let's do this again sometime. And let me get the questions ahead of time, and I'll put a slide presentation. I answer all of them in my seminar series, which you can get from drdino.com, DRDINO, or you can call 855-BIG-DINO. Go to extension 1 and get my whole series of tapes for $50. It's 18 hours. After you watch it, you can return it and get your money back, minus the shipping. I don't know anybody who does that. I mean, we're trying to win the war. So all these questions get now. Adam, I guess I would have a question for you. If all these questions could be answered satisfactorily with a reasonable, logical, scientific answer, would you then say, wow, the Bible's true, I'm going to accept Jesus Christ as my Savior? Or would you go around looking for 50 more questions? If you're a hypocrite, you would keep looking for 50 more questions because you wouldn't want the truth to be known. But if you're really sincere, honest, intelligent individual, you'd say, okay, wow, there is an answer. I think I'll accept what the Bible says. I think the flood teaches, Bible clearly teaches there was a flood. There's no question about that. Jesus certainly believed in it. He quoted it many times. There are 350 flood legends around the world. Something had to happen for there to be a legend like that. 70% of the earth is still covered by sedimentary rock, which is flood-borne sedimentary rock. Rounded gravel worldwide. I'm in a gravel pit here. We have billions of rocks. They're rounded off. Rock tumbler, Noah's flood. The ark has been found. They've studied it. They've measured it. They've looked at it. It's made of 3 layers of laminated wood, about 4 or 5 inches thick. There are polystrata fossils found all over the world. Petrified trees standing up, connecting all these layers. We teach all those layers would form in one flood. Get a jar of water, add sand, gravel, rocks, mud, and shake it up. It'll settle into layers in seconds in your hand. Hydrologic sorting would happen because of Noah's flood. There's enough water on the earth right now to cover the earth 1.5 miles deep. It's not a question of is there enough water. During the flood, it was probably all fresh water. It's gotten saltier since then. Noah didn't have to bring water on the ark. They could drink out of the ocean. Time's up. Oh, rats. A Chinese calendar. I'll get to all of them next time, Adam. Hang in there. But remember, if I answer them all, I want you to get converted, okay?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Dr. Hovind. Thanks so much for a great debate, gentlemen. So we're just going to go into a really, really fast-paced Q&A here. I've got 2 questions for each of the debaters. So I guess I'll start with Dr. Hovind here. The question for you is, how does Kent explain the ordering of the fossil record? For example, no whales in Cambrian layers.
Well, I would say, first place, there is no such thing as a fossil record. There are fossils, billions of them, possibly trillions. Fossils indicate rapid burial. The bones are still articulated. They didn't get dragged around by the woods, by the coyotes and the buzzards, etc. So there is no fossil record. It is us putting our interpretation on them. If there's any sorting at all, and it's not a clear sorting like they would like you to believe, I think you would generally find birds on top, because birds are the last ones to drown, and when they drown, they have hollow feathers and bones, and so they're going to float to the top. I think we generally would find clams at the bottom, because clams are already at the bottom when the flood starts, and they have solid shell, and they're heavy, and they can't run very fast. They're going to be the first ones buried. So I think if there's any sorting at all, in some areas there is sort of a sorting. It's based upon body density. It's based upon mobility or intelligence. I think if you Google what is the body density of the average reptile, you'll find it is different than the body density of the average mammal. So they're automatically going to be sorted by density. Hello, it's simple physics 101. Of course, things are sorted by density. So I think if there's any sorting at all, and it's not like they would like you to believe, the fossil record and the geologic column, if there's any semblance to it, it could easily be explained by a Noah's flood. A worldwide flood would answer all of that without a question. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate that answer, Dr. Hovind. So this question is for Adam. How does Adam explain the existence of living fossils, for example, the coelacanth and the Wollemi pine? Go ahead.
Well, when something is suitable to its environment, then there's no pressure for it to change. You see this in a lot of body forms, like fish, for example. Fish have been around for many, many years. And it's as simple as that. If there's no need to change, then there's no need to change. Sometimes things will diverse a bit and then come back into the previous environment and go back to what they were before. It's when they enter new environments or new situations that they'll start to see the change. So, of course, you're going to get some creatures that spend the vast majority of history in very, very similar environments, either because those environments are large and don't change very much, or because those environments can just shift and the animals can follow. Of course, there are different examples. For example, when you get an island splitting off or animals landing on an island, say from the mainland, that creatures adapt much quicker because they're in different environments. That's my answer to the question.
Okay, thanks, Adam. I appreciate that. Next question, I'll just read this word for word for Dr. Hovind. The questioner in the audience asks, in the Bible, how can the first day and second day be literal days when the sun and moon were made on the fourth day and evening and morning were made on the first day?
Well, great question. If the sun disappeared right now, blew up, left the galaxy, left the universe, we could still have a 24-hour day because it's how long Earth spins, how long does Earth take to spin around one time? That is a day. A day is defined as one spin of the Earth. Whether there's a sun or not doesn't matter. Now, it just so happens that half of the day, 24-hour day, is lit up. We call that day also, daylight. Half of it is dark. But it could be one spin of the Earth in relation to anything. The Earth could be spinning in relation to the pole, some star someplace, or in relation to anything. I think God purposely made the sun later in the creation week. It's only a couple days later. It's not a big deal. He purposely made the sun later so we would know not to worship it. It's just a necessary object. Oxygen's necessary too. You got to have it, but we don't worship it. Water's necessary, but we don't worship that either. So the sun is neat. I'm glad we got it up there, but it's not something we should worship. And most cultures of the world have fallen into the trap of worshiping the sun of some kind, like the atheist Aaron Ra, the sun god, he calls himself. So I think God made it later just so we'd know not to be so stupid as to worship the sun.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Dr. Hovind. So we got the final question here for Adam. Adam, the question is, how does Adam explain the sediment layers and that we see quick or no erosion between layers and we see complete rock layer sequences deposited rapidly in abrupt succession? Go ahead, Adam. Oh, did you get that, Adam? Are you on mute?
Sorry, I was on mute. I was just in the middle of saying I am not a geologist. I have no idea. I don't know how rocks work. I do not know how rocks work. So if I said anything, it would be ignorant. Born of ignorance.
Okay, I can allow a quick last response.
Can I say
Dr. Hovind there if you'd like, and then we can.
Can I say something about his previous response then, if he gets something?
Sure. If Dr. Hovind wants to respond to that one real quick, and then you can do a quick response to Dr. Hovind's question, and then we'll call it a day, gentlemen.
Yeah, I think sediment layers are very easy to explain by a worldwide flood in the days of Noah. You can make sediment layers, we make it in a jar in a matter of seconds. I can show it, it can watch it happen. So that's real science. Science is things we can observe, study, and test and demonstrate. I think we can demonstrate with a scientific experiment that animals would automatically sort themselves, dead animals, based on body density, habitat mobility, etc., and that sediment layers can be formed rapidly. There's a video called Experiments in Stratification where they show sediment layers, 10 or 15 at a time, being deposited horizontally. The atheists are saying the layers on top are younger than the ones on the bottom. I say, you got to be kidding. If this one's younger, did it come from outer space? How can any layer possibly be younger than any other layer unless it came from outer space? All the layers are the same age. They were just reshuffled at the time of Noah's flood, but they don't want to believe in the flood. Peter hit it right on the head. They're willingly ignorant of the creation and the flood because it represents the judgment of God. So I don't think there's no such thing as a fossil record. The sediment layers all formed during Noah's flood. They're all the same age. And petrified trees in the vertical position are proof of that. And I show that some other time. Go ahead.
I just want a quick word on your density decides where something lands in the layers. I looked up earlier today spiders, and you have Sicariidae, which is found in the Neogene strata, which is some of the top layers of rocks. You also get spiders Aterocopus, found in Devonian strata, which are much, much further down. This alone is a clear contradiction to your idea that everything is sorted by density, because they're both spiders.
Well, I can answer that very simply. During the flood, there would be areas that would be inundated for a while, and then if the crust of the earth flexes up and down, like it would normally, then that layer may be up and exposed and dry out, and then it goes down, and new layers are put on top. If all of the strata were formed at the same time, you would be correct. I said all of the strata were formed in the same flood. That flood could deposit things where you'd get the denser object stuck in the top because it was during the last part of the flood that it finally got settled there. I think it's very easy to explain how things could be out of order based upon a flood lasting a year and the crust of the earth flexing up and down. So right here in our gravel pit, we have 5 layers of gravel, clay, gravel, clay, gravel, clay. You guys saw them today. That would be formed by each tide. Each tide coming in would form a layer of gravel. And then during high tide, when it sits still, small stuff settles out and makes a layer of clay. You can Google stratification, and you'll see it all over the world. Let's see, 264. We have the little thing made out of sand right here. You flip it over, and it makes multiple layers in a matter of a minute. This doesn't take a long time. These little sand toys, you can buy them at, I don't know if they have Walmart in England, but they make multiple strata very rapidly. So there's no such thing as a geologic column. It's one of the dumbest ideas we've ever taught to kids. I taught earth science 15 years. There is no geologic column. The stratification would be because of Noah's flood, and there may end up being some layers on top, just like these 2 densities of sand, blue and white. They're going to sort into multiple layers. Here, the black and the white are different densities, but it doesn't just all be black at the bottom and white on top. It has to do with how the water moves around. Okay.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for that response, Dr. Hovind. Awesome Q&A, guys. The debate was very enjoyable. I want to thank you both for giving us your time. I know you guys are very busy. So as usual, it was a blast, guys. If you want to say some final words, if you want to promote your channels or whatever, and then we'll call it a day.
Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, where do I find this recording? It's not on YouTube, is it?
Yes. Adam, it will be. This debate will be uploaded on my channel, Standing for Truth, probably in the next 30 minutes or so. So I can send you the link.
So Adam, are you talking about this debate we just did? It'll be on his channel and our channel, Dr. Kent Hovind Official. But the Experiments in Stratification is called Experiments in Stratification. It was done at the Navy flume in Colorado, where they test stratification so they can know where to hide their submarines and stuff. Experiments in Stratification. Okay.
I just want to say thank you, Kent. Thank you, Standing, and thank you, Praise. It's been enjoyable, and I hope you'll have a tremendous evening.
Well, thank you for coming doing this, Adam, and I hope you have a tremendous eternity. I hope you get all this straightened out and accept Jesus Christ as your Savior, because the Bible is true. And not only, the Bible says the scoffers are ignorant of the creation and the flood, they're ignorant of the coming judgment. And there's a judgment coming, whether you believe it or not. I'm trying to help you get ready for that. So Jesus died on the cross to pay for your sins, and if you'll accept his payment, he'll move inside and make a whole new person out of you. It's wonderful. Come visit Dinosaur Adventureland, Adam. I'll give you a tour, show you around the place, and we'll get you converted.
If you could pay for the flight, that would be lovely.
Can't do that. You get here and we'll feed you and house you.
Amen, Dr. Hovind. Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen. Praise, if you want to have a final word there and shut her down, brother.
Yeah, this was awesome. I appreciate Dr. Hovind coming on, and Adam. It was a pleasure for me, and I would like to do this more often. these type of debates are really interesting and fascinating. So I want to say thanks to everyone coming in here and participating in the chat. And I want to say God bless and see you later.